Whenever things got rough, I always remember what my father used to say.
Running a business does test a man, my son.
The character of a man and the character of a business are not very different, are they?
Yes. But when the chips are down, we must stand up, dust ourselves off, and motor on.
Dad always said, there are no shortcuts and no quick profits.
There are no free lunches, are there? There is only one
Right way.
PPFAS Mutual Fund. There's only one right way.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme-related documents carefully.
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for coming here again. I'm Ronak Onkar with PPFAS Mutual Fund. Just before I start, it looks fancy and all, but how many of you understand what a server is? Just a basic understanding of what a server is. And other than somebody who serves you coffee. Okay. How many of you understand what an operating system is? Just, okay. Enough people understand it, okay. Because these concepts will be used and I will not try to explain them, but I will if you want to. So please interrupt me whenever you feel like it's getting too technical and too complex to figure out and you want to just nod off. So don't nod off. We have a camera recording everything. So 2 years ago, we discussed in a presentation about a lot of exponential technologies changing the business landscape or the economic landscape. And one of the points that I mentioned very briefly, and to be very precise, for 30 seconds I spoke about this, called cloud computing. I just thought maybe it's a good time to revisit after 2 years because the business has now grown substantially across the world. But before that, how many people watch Game of Thrones? See, more hands for Game of Thrones than for server and operating system. So for the past 6 seasons, I've been hearing this, that winter is coming, but it's just coming. And in the Indian IT industry, they were always saying the cloud is coming, digital is coming, technology is moving to that side. Well, now is the time to say that the winter has arrived. So the cloud is here, everybody is now getting their business model straight, and it will be an interesting way to understand what is happening in the entire cloud landscape. So this will be the layout of the presentation. We will deal with some jargon because there is some stuff that you need to understand to really get the idea of cloud and how it really helps people. Then we'll look at the usual suspects who are the biggest cloud players in the market. We'll also look at some business models which were reinvented because of this technology's availability. We'll also look at a couple of companies only, but there are a lot of companies in that area who have provided specific technology for the cloud and which are now growing. These companies are now growing because of the cloud market picking up. And finally, the reason why I decided to talk about this, and this is how I started the idea to talk about cloud or learn about cloud, is to understand the future of enterprise IT services companies. So let's dive in. So for a long time, we have been hearing that the cost of computers or computing technology keeps going down every year. And it creates a contradiction that if something is becoming cheaper, why do people want to not use it in their office and upgrade it very frequently to the cheapest technology rather than putting everything in the cloud? So why is cloud so important? Is cloud a hype? Because if computers keep getting cheaper and cheaper, at one point it will justify you to just keep upgrading your servers to the lowest cost and getting better features every time. But anybody who runs a small business would have seen this familiar sight. This is the backside of a server box or a networking box in an office, a small office, where the intentions are very good to keep everything clean, and for exactly 1 week all cables and everything are aligned properly. But afterwards, when you add another disk, add another server, add one more router, add another network connection somewhere, and the box ends up looking like this. So this is a server unit which is sufficient for a single location office where there are a few terminals which are going to use some business or enterprise software, and you know that the use is not going to exceed beyond the point. So this seems okay. I mean, you just close the doors and forget about it. It just works. But what if, by grace of God or good luck, the business scales, you start getting traction, your sales increase, and you now want to go from one location to multi-location, and you now want to expand your business operations, you now want to get some sophisticated IT systems in place, some good softwares in place which will help you track your business properly. And for that, you will require a lot of sophisticated IT technology. You will require to hire people who understand how to run servers. You will need to talk to software vendors to sell you the right product. You need to have the implementation guys help you create a link between all your software so that you can have one single dashboard for yourself. And it looks pretty, but it can get a little complicated as the business starts scaling. So I think you must have read this book, and it's one of my favorite books about Amazon, at least. In this book, Jeff Bezos mentions this line, and it's quite revealing about how he thinks about computing technology. He says, you go back in time 100 years, if you wanted to have electricity, you had to build your own little electric power plant. And a lot of factories did this. As soon as the electric power grid came online, they dumped their electric power generator and they started buying power off the grid. That's what is happening with infrastructure computing. So yeah, I mean, we know Jeff Bezos has the penchant of talking grand things and he executes them also. It's not like just talks. But is it really that easy? I mean, we can understand a power plant. You can just plug off your generator, sell the equipment and plug it into some other socket and you get the same power everywhere. But in the cloud computing parlance, in the infrastructure computing parlance, is it as easy as moving from switch 1 to switch 2? So this is basically the entire presentation, and if somebody is savvy with technology and understands this, you can just directly go and have your drinks and dinner and you can move on. But those who want to stay, this is a good map to understand what is happening in the cloud computing space. So on the left hand side, this stack represents enterprise IT. I am not sure if you can see in the back. Is it visible? Okay. I'll try to paraphrase as much as I can. So in the enterprise IT, like we saw, the server and the sophisticated business that is growing now, we have all these layers of IT infrastructure which you need in order to run that infrastructure properly throughout your entire network, no matter where your offices are. So you have right from your own data centers to networking equipment set up to take advantage of the connectivity. Then you have storage requirements, then you have databases to maintain, you have various operating systems, you have to maintain security of your servers. So if your server has a chance to go online, somebody might also have a chance to hack it from outside. So you have to make sure that you have adequate security so people cannot enter or exit without permission. And then you have all your business applications on top of that. So it seems complicated, but it is very easy to execute. I mean, this is a 40-year history of the IT industry in one stack. You can see how technologies have grown and adapted and stuck together to create a holistic IT experience. The cloud that we know of, I mean, the definition of cloud when it came out, it's mostly about the infrastructure as a service, which is IaaS. So you can immediately see the parts that are grayed out. These services are now managed by the cloud computing provider. And these are basically bare shell, very basic services. You don't need to think too much about it. You just put some servers there which were in your premise, but now in some remote location. You make sure that there's networking connectivity for that. You make sure that there are storage capability over there. You make sure you have different types of servers based on people's needs. You have a Windows server or Linux server. Anytime. Stop me whenever you think I'm going too fast. If you think Linux is something you think is a name of a clown, tell me, I will explain to you. But all you have to bring to that cloud is your applications which you're already using, your local security that you're following, databases which you have probably using some database software like Oracle, or maybe you have an open source SQL database, and your own operating systems, which are terminals which you're using in your office. So you can immediately see that the moment a cloud computing vendor provides you the option to offload some of your infrastructure needs on the cloud, there's a chance that you don't need to provide for all these things. That means you don't need to buy new servers, you don't need to buy networking equipment, your bandwidth costs go down because you don't have to connect your offices via your own broadband connection, and so on.
What is virtualization?
Good question. So I read about this, and when I was trying to understand this properly, and because I have an IT background, for some reason I could understand something of it. I could just make sense of it. But I realized that today if I'm talking about some technical jargon, and it's already a jargon, and you cannot explain jargon with some new jargon. So I just thought I will explain with something what we just had. So forget the name, concept, the concept names, the name of the concept for a while. Just look at those pizzas, okay? So imagine that you decide one day that screw my diet, I don't want to eat anything healthy. I will spend the entire day eating only pizzas 4 times a day. My breakfast, my lunch, my supper and my dinner are all going to be pizzas. But of course, you are a man of taste, a woman of taste. You want to enjoy different toppings on your pizza. You don't want to use the same pizza again and again. So you decide that, okay, I will eat one pizza in the morning with a different topping, the lunch will be a different topping and so on. But your appetite is only for 2 slices. And you know that a third slice will be too much. I mean, it's okay to leave your diet, but third slice will be overkill. So you decide to, talk to the guy and say, why don't you give me 2 slices of my favorite topping pizza? And the guy says, no, you have to buy the entire pizza and you do whatever with it. I mean, you give it to your friends or you throw it away, which is, I think, a crime, but still. So you can imagine that you consume 2 slices out of 8 and you have to throw the 6 away. Same thing happens for every meal and you end up basically throwing away the majority of your food and consuming only what you really wanted to have. So now in technology context, you have a Windows operating system server which you want to use, and there is one application which runs on that server, and that only uses 20% of the server's overall capacity, because nobody is going to give you a very poor capacity server. They will give you a standard size server, but you don't require standard size, you just require 20% of it. So you put it in that rack which you saw and you connect your cables to it and you run that software, and 20% of your usage is done, the other 80% is wasted. Then as your business grows, you add a Linux based software operating system, a new server comes in, you have some other applications that you have to run on that server, and again you used up 30% of your capacity only, and the remaining 70% is again wasted. It's just like the pizza which you only wanted to have 2 slices, you ended up throwing away the other 6 slices. So virtualization technology is a software which basically allows you to combine 2 operating systems into one single server. So where you were losing only using 20%, 30% on 2 separate servers and wasting the rest of the capacity, now your utilization goes up because you are adding the 20 and 30% on the same server, and the software will just allow you to let these 2 systems coexist and run as if they are 2 separate things. That's why it's a virtual machine, that's what they call it. And this can be implemented in your local cloud, it can be implemented on the, not local cloud, your local data centers or on the cloud data centers. I hope it's easy to understand now after the pizza. Pizza is gone, by the way, so probably just keep salivating for a while. Another important factor which affects the decision to go on the cloud or not is networking. I want you guys to look at the picture now and tell me what do you think it is. Okay, how many of you say undersea cable? But for what? Okay. Internet. How many of you say optic fiber cables? No, I'm just saying what are the red lines. So people who said undersea cables were right, but only half right. This is a map from 1901 which shows the undersea telegraph cables. So the concept of intercontinental networking is not something new. In 1901, they had telegraph cables laid under the seabed to communicate between continents. And this is a map. I tried to deliberately find a map which looked old. And this is a map, actually a map of all the undersea optic fiber cables connected now. So this is a map from 2015. It won't be accurate, but still, it's illustrative. The whole idea is to see that the entire world is now connected with really high bandwidth, high speed optic fiber cables. Some of them laid by the cloud computing providers and most of it laid by the networking companies or telecom companies of the world. So probably leaving Antarctica, there is no part of the globe which is not touching an optic fiber cable. So a signal can go anywhere. These sort of things get undermined when you are trying to set up your own networking infrastructure. When you have offices all over the world, say you have an office in India, you have an office in the UK, you have an office in the US, and you want to maintain a common network for everyone. So what data is updated in the US should be real-time updated across all the network servers across the world in your business. It's easy to do, it's not something complicated, this is a solved problem. But the problem to maintain that is, you don't know how much data you're going to get at every single point in time. Maybe at some time the data is going to be 10 GB, maybe sometimes it's going to be 500 MB or 5 MB or whatever. So you have to buy a network pipe or a bandwidth, which is again like the pizza example. You only need 20% of it, but 80% of it will just be empty. Maybe on a peak load, you might get to use some more, but again, it's a wasted pipe. So why not take advantage of all the existing network provided by all these cloud computing companies and make sure that you adopt the cloud for saving on bandwidth costs. So far on the infrastructure side, the two most important costs will be the cost of the server itself, data center itself, and networking. None of these concepts, by the way, are really old. As computer science research goes, these concepts have emerged probably in the 70s or the 80s, but they have found a vehement application only now because people have realized that they can tweak it in some ways which was not possible before because of a lot of improved programming languages. So the second point, platform as a service. This is the real icing on the cloud cake. Without platform as a service, the cloud is just a dumb server which is not in your office but somewhere else, connected by their own pipe. So now you can see the boxes which have been grayed out are all going to be managed by the cloud provider itself. The cloud provider is now inviting you and telling you that you bring your application and you use our platform to develop the application, run the application, and use whatever services I am providing to you, which are in the industry parlance called APIs or application programming interfaces. So with the technology that the cloud provider brings now, it is above and beyond just the server and the networking capability that they were bringing in. And this is the real differentiator. So people generally thought that cloud is a commodity business. Anybody can go to New Bombay, buy a huge plot of land, connect it with power cables, install your own servers, connect to the internet, and your cloud is ready. Well, yeah, it's only 10% ready. You are not providing any new services, so your value of that cloud will only be as much as the lowest priced person in the market. But the moment you have these platform services provided, and we'll see some of them later, the moment you have platform services provided, you will get an exponential benefit from being on a technology which is provided to you. But enterprise IT did not grow like that. Enterprise IT grew up with a patchwork of systems and technologies, and only those who had the massive amount of capital to upgrade systems more often, they could upgrade to the latest technology. But the ones who, generally it's a known fact or a known trend that the enterprise IT customer is at least 5 years behind latest technology on average. And there's a reason for that. You cannot keep on investing money in new softwares and new hardware just because it's just 5 years old. But it's working. Why should I sell it? Why should I scrap it? So all your accounting principles like depreciation and everything, they matter a lot when it comes to the enterprise IT guy who has a very specific, highly customized need for his business. But on the cloud, you will find a wide spectrum of customers. So on one side you have this fussy, highly customized IT guy from the enterprise side who requires only what he requires and he cannot compromise for something else because that's how his system was built. And on the other side there were businesses which are born on the cloud. They have taken the advantage of the cloud technology to such an extent that they can instantly scale their applications at a moment's notice. So in the last presentation we saw Snapchat, and it's an interesting example because it's listed now, and in their IPO document they mentioned that on an average they pay $400 million a year to Google, whose cloud platform they use. And I found it fascinating that that's it. If you want to run an app which is as popular and always available like Snapchat with 400 million total users and 100 million daily users, how do they manage to run it? How in India am I able to get the same speed of Snapchat as probably somebody else in the US where the server might be located? So you can imagine the launch of Snapchat in India, all they had to do was add one more server in India and the app is launched immediately. They took advantage of the APIs that Google provided. It's called the Google App Engine, Google's platform as a service, which they used to create the software itself. So all they had to do was bring 5 programmers, build the software and make sure that the meter is running. They will keep paying for whatever they use on the cloud, and the moment they want to add new features, they'll hire some other person to code. Their focus is no longer on maintaining servers. Their focus is no longer on maintaining network bandwidth. We discussed last time that some filters that come on Snapchat, they get 200 million views in one day. So imagine you're Snapchat and you decide one day, you're the CTO and you want to decide how much servers will be required to, if an ad comes to us, how much servers will I need to let the ad be visible to everyone. So you say, okay, we have 100 million daily active users, assuming all of them come. So we require at least 100 million users capacity. Then because he's an engineer, he will add some margin of safety. He will say, okay, let's do 150%. Let's not go crazy. We have limited amount of money. So he arranges for 150%, that is 150 million people to use that, to view that video or the ad at that time. But what if 200 million people show up? So you're basically letting your business's ability to show an ad to the customer or the user fail. That is your basic business, to show an ad. You got paid for showing that ad and you're not able to show it to 50 million of your users. So why do you want to get in the whole mess of creating that situation for yourself? Whereas you just put on Google, Google will scale it to even 500 million users if required, and they will ask you to pay for it. Same with Netflix. Netflix and Airbnb are with Amazon's AWS cloud platform, and if you have ever used these apps, I'm sure Netflix people must have used. How many times do you find that the video doesn't load unless our internet is broken? But otherwise, it just works. Every time, there is no delay at all. And imagine hosting it somewhere in your own house. Imagine you have a server in your house which you're maintaining yourself and you're watching a movie on some other computer from that server. I'm sure you will get some lags. So we have a wide spectrum of users on the cloud. So the cloud is for everyone, but not necessarily everybody uses it to the maximum extent possible. But these companies do, because they were born on the cloud. And the final piece of the cloud computing technology stack is the software as a service. And we are intimately aware of this. On our phone, 90% of stuff is software as a service. Imagine Gmail. It's a software as a service. We know how Gmail works. We don't have to maintain any local servers, local files. Everything is on the cloud. Gmail manages everything. Google takes care of all our data that is sent and received. That's it. I think that's a broad enough example to explain what that company is, that concept is. But how do these cloud companies make money? So it's something like a Uber model, where we know that we pay for the distance that we travel and the time that we spend in the car. So we pay for that much only. So it's pay as per your use. Or maybe you think that you want some exclusivity, so you get the car for yourself for the entire day. But you avoid paying the driver's salary, you avoid paying the maintenance of the car. You just get the car for yourself. Once you're done using it, you can relinquish the car and go back to your business. So it's a very simple model to pay. But there are several, so if you go in detail to understand what is being sold, there are several microservices which are sold, which probably if you're curious enough, you can probably read afterwards. I don't want to bore you guys with those details. So now we look at the cloud companies, the usual suspects who are the biggest and the baddest in the business. But before that, there's an important technical concept. I just want you to understand this, because a lot of data when you read in the media will mention the public and private cloud. And if you don't understand what public and private cloud is and just focus on the cloud, you might mistake the concept for one for the other. So when we hear of AWS, Google and all these big cloud platform companies, they mean by public cloud. So it's like an apartment building where there is one landlord and there are multiple tenants who are using that apartment, or like a common swimming pool where everybody is a member and he dives in when he shows the membership card. But maybe you want your own swimming pool. So this is your private swimming pool, same technology platform given to you, but it's only for you. You can only swim. Nobody else can swim with you unless you want to. Another funny thing, every month some new chart comes up for cloud computing and they will give some random numbers with decimal point accurate data. But I don't know what is the real market size. So they say Amazon is 37% of the market, the cloud market. But they fail to mention, is it just infrastructure or is it platform as a service also? Well, I think it should be both. Again, Windows or Microsoft Azure is the leading second with 28% market share. So these two companies now corner around more than 60% market share in the industry, and the other players are catching up, and there will be still thousands more who will provide just bare minimum infrastructure services to you. But again, these numbers, without putting a context to it, don't make any sense. So I just tried to find some macro data, just to zoom out a little bit and figure out where do these companies sit, in which part of the ecosystem do they sit. So if you look at global GDP, it's around $75 trillion, give or take. I don't dispute on this. This is some Wikipedia information. So total technology spending in the world is $2 trillion. Among that, $1 trillion is consumer tech, which is B2C, which includes hardware as well. Another trillion goes for business to business, which also includes hardware but no networking. So that is about 3% of the world GDP is in technology. So we know where they stand. Out of that, the enterprise software companies, the Oracles, the SAPs of the world, they fall in the other 700 billion category from $1 trillion. And a small category out of $1 trillion is the cloud computing technology company, which is $40 billion. Now, again, like I said, it's difficult to say that if it only includes the infrastructure or the platform and SaaS companies as well. I tend to believe that it includes everything. So it's a small market if you see in comparison to the entire IT industry, but it affects everything. Yeah, sure.
One clarification which I've always wondered. So this $700 billion is kind of a capex investment.
It's license plus AMC and all those kind of things for the products that you consume. So if you want to buy an Oracle database for your company, you will get a license and an AMC. So it will be part of that.
So, we need to differentiate between one-time expenditure, which is, the enterprise softwares or all the IT systems and the equipment, etc. It's lumpy investment plus there is an ongoing AMC kind of investment,
right,
and license investment.
Yes.
And what about the cloud? Cloud, is it, so my question is, are we comparing investment versus a annual expense? Cloud could be a rental kind of a...
Cloud is subscription based, mostly.
So even though it is just $40 million, billion dollars, it actually represents a much larger investment, isn't it?
It actually represents foregone investment, which you could have done on your own and would have been part of this and this. But now you don't need to do that.
But when you are, when you put it alongside that, I'm just trying to understand.
Yeah, sure.
Are you mixing up, somebody is buying a flat versus somebody renting a flat? So you are comparing the buyer's market with the renter's market. But somebody has bought that market for somebody is making the investment for the renter, right?
Yes.
So if you are putting, it looks small bubble, but is it representing $400 billion of annual investment? That's what I'm asking.
I think Rajiv has an answer. I'll just give the mic to him. It's good to send difficult questions back to Rajiv.
So your point is true for one individual company. Let us say if your company is going to have to spend 100 on capex versus spending, let's say, 20 on rental. So then it's not an apples to apples comparison. But when we are talking of industry data, let us say the life of a server is 5 years. Now, this year, first company will buy a server, next year the other company will buy a server, third year some other company will buy a server. So, for the, let's say, if IBM was in the server business, they are not now increasingly, but for IBM it's an annual sale. At the industry level, you can make total revenue comparisons because ultimately that will spread out over the years. It's not a comparison which doesn't make sense. You cannot say that, let's say, cloud into 5 is the comparable revenue because 700 billion worth of hardware is sold each year. It's not that 700 billion is sold 1 year and 4 years there's no sale. These are annual revenues for the companies.
Right.
Yeah, what I mean is, I'm also talking I've seen the numbers of IBM. So people just think that their cloud business is very small compared to the enterprise business, right? But suppose this $40 billion revenue is due to a much larger investment in hardware and
Oh, let's take a simple example. Let's say iPhones. Now, purchasing an iPhone will cost you, let's say, 70,000 rupees. Whereas, let's say there was a rental model available which cost you maybe 30,000 a year, factoring in again interest cost and all that. Now, whether you take 70,000 as revenue for 1 year or divide it over 3, your point is that $700 billion spending on servers will last, let's say, for 5 years or 3 years, whatever time frame you assume. And we should spread it out over more years to do a like for like comparison. But this is the amount that has been spent each year by the industry. And yeah.
I'm asking an additional question. But suppose out of that $700 billion investment, half of it was to provide the cloud revenues. So you are counting it in hardware sales, but actually if all that money was spent by somebody else to provide cloud business.
That's an interesting point. What he's saying is, out of the $700 billion, some of it would be spending by Amazon, Microsoft, Google on building data centers.
Yes.
So that is actually not enterprise spend, that is a spend to provide that cloud service. So that breakup, I don't think would be readily available.
The capex numbers are anyway mentioned every quarter, and out of that they mention how much they spend for building the data centers. And incrementally that cost keeps coming down, because once you settle up the place, all you have to do is
why I'm asking this question is, in IBM, a lot of people are saying that these guys have a much bigger enterprise business and they are lagging in cloud business. But their cloud business is now substantial. But it's not a like-to-like comparison.
So slides.
Cloud revenues are more like an annuity, which they will keep on getting, right?
Yes.
Yeah, but in IBM's case, it's fair enough to compare annual cloud revenue with annual enterprise sale, because that happens over the year. So you don't do a multiplier for cloud, or you don't divide for other enterprise services, because it's an annual revenue. The concept of spreading it out over 5 years doesn't make sense, because let's say if there are 5 customers.
Let's look at a GM. Okay. So
I think we'll take this question because we are discussing IBM somewhere down the line.
Yes.
Once the presentation is over, we can
Makes sense.
take this in detail.
So this cloud, $40 billion of cloud revenue can signify infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. And for some reason, the industry data for all these companies which are mentioned here is not available in the format that we like to see. So all I did was, because the growth numbers are staggering, I just decided to take the latest cloud numbers which I could calculate. In some cases it is readily available, like for example AWS started showing their cloud computing revenues in the past 3 years, and now it's a $12 billion category with 25% operating margins, and it has grown 53% over the last year's cloud revenues. 10 years ago, Amazon runs its own website with the same technology that they are offering to other people to rent. So if you see the Amazon site is up, that means it's always up, and AWS is working somewhere in the background, and it again becomes an advertisement for the reliability of a network which is available all the time. So from 10 years ago, where it will be a minuscule part of the sales because they were not offering it as a full-fledged service, it has now come up with all kinds of platform services for developers and regular users and become a $12 billion market leader. The next one, I had to back calculate from what numbers they provided. Microsoft Azure is about $8 billion as of December 2016 and has grown more than double over the past entire year. And they have an interesting history. So they were there and were not there. So in the past we had a Windows and Intel partnership for selling computers, and it was a very profitable partnership for both companies, and Microsoft became a household name because of that, and Intel became the biggest market share leader in server business. And they have their operating systems for server called Windows Server, and everything is there. So they never took it so seriously until now, when you start seeing the numbers. The history of 10 years, which we may have ignored because we think Microsoft is the underdog. Now Apple is taking over, iPhones are taking over, desktop PCs are no more required. But somewhere beneath all that fog was this business growing, and now it's the second largest company in the world in cloud, providing cloud services. Google, again, famously does not disclose the cloud business, and because I could take an estimate, I did. I think it is close to $5 billion last year. I have no idea how much it grew over the past year. I'm sure it must be more than double digits. And Google, again, has an interesting business. So their entire infrastructure, which they have developed for themselves, is now available for everybody else to rent. Of course, apart from the Google services that are running anyway. So Google has to run all over the world. So they have to set up data centers and network capability all over the world. They have to put up the fiber under the sea, and they have to lease all these bandwidth for themselves. Why not create a sellable platform, which they did in the past 5-6 years? They got serious in selling it to enterprises and making sure that they have a sellable product, rather than just saying that we have built it, if you want, please come and take it. So now if you look at the cloud conferences over the past 2 years, there's a remarkable change in the way they approach enterprises, the way they market themselves, the way they talk about themselves. They're serious about growing this business. Since you're talking about IBM, so in IBM's segment numbers, in the past 6 quarters, they have revised their segmental reporting. Before that, there was no cloud. They had server as a category, and they were providing services as a separate category. So this came under global business segment. Now they have started showing the new initiatives as a separate category. In that, they mention cloud, but somewhere in the notes they also mention that as a service revenue, which can include infrastructure and platform or some software which IBM is selling, which may not be part of the cloud business. So I had to eliminate some revenue in order to come with $13 billion of cloud revenue. I'm pretty sure this number is not correct in the context of Amazon and other people, because IBM cannot be bigger than Amazon in terms of the cloud business which IBM represents. But in enterprise computing, enterprise cloud business, which also includes private cloud setup for some of the clients or clouds for IBM itself, it is a sizable number, and it has grown by 35%, whereas the remaining of the business has grown less than 10% over the past year. And interestingly, this has been the evolution of the cloud services. So when we say platform and software as a service or infrastructure, this is actually what they are selling. These are the broader services which they offer, and underneath there are all these microservices. So for instance, you need to have an interface to manage your data and software on the cloud. They provide you with basic management tools which will allow you to tweak your usage that you do. They'll provide data services to store your data and have a database management system if you don't have your own. They will also provide you with analytics tools. So Amazon has the API available because they use it for themselves. When you get a recommendation that people who bought this also bought this on Amazon, there is a data analytics algorithm in the background which is providing based on your usage on Amazon. And that technology is available for anyone who wants to tap into it. Or you can bring your own technology from outside, because the cloud is for anyone. You have rented the space, you can bring whatever you want inside. It's like you rent the apartment and you bring your own furniture. Or you may use the furniture provided by the landlord. Again, like Google, Amazon also has a global website, and they need to provide connectivity to themselves. And they have provided a backbone for themselves, and some surplus bandwidth or additional purchase bandwidth can be provided as a service to customers. Compute is the most common form of a cloud computing service, where all you do is rent a server and run your stuff, and every time you use a server instance, that is what you pay for. And each type of servers which you use will have its own pricing. So the most important part over the past few years has been developer tools, where the focus has been to attract more and more developers to the Amazon Cloud Platform, so that they will create apps which will be based on Amazon Cloud Platform, and people will use them, and it creates like a flywheel effect which Amazon has in its retail business. The more people come here, the more they use it, the more popular it becomes, and the more people it brings back. Again, security, which is taken care of at the cloud level, because they will manage wholesale data of everyone, and if one breach happens in data center, you lose your reputation for life. So they will be very serious about providing security. They will hire all the cutting edge engineers who are available out there in terms of cloud services and security. So we know that these numbers cannot be relied upon. Every month they will keep bringing numbers up. But somewhere you know that the numbers disclosed are not entirely inaccurate. We just need to adjust the denominator and add or subtract whatever we want. But because of the cloud business, a lot of new business models have emerged. It's nothing new actually, but they have started selling themselves or selling their products in a different way. So for example, so if you watch Amazon's cloud conference videos, they will they will badmouth Oracle, and Oracle's conference will say something bad about Amazon, but yet they will partner at the end of the day. They will still have services which can be portable on both platforms. So it's all fun and games, but it's not funny anymore when $4 billion of revenue from Oracle's business is now coming from the cloud software sales. So Oracle is famously known for database management systems or enterprise resource planning ERP systems, which have to be installed on premise and which is the bread and butter business of all IT companies. And if this company is now selling itself on the cloud, you can imagine the amount of effort that is reduced from implementation that is needed on the premise of the customer. This business has grown 60% for Oracle, which is just selling licenses and providing AMC for the same software which they have spent 10 years to port to the cloud. And traditional software business still is available, but it is not growing as fast. So it's a strategic decision, more of a fashionable decision to make, because they have to move to the cloud where the growth is and where the margins are quite high, because you don't have to spend so much money again anymore. Same story with SAP. So famous big box ERP software which feeds all the IT companies in the world who will implement their softwares across clients' machines. Traditional business is growing at 1%, and their cloud software business, which is the HANA platform, if you have heard of it, is now $3 billion and growing at 30%. The base is small, so the growth looks higher, but still it's a strategic choice that they have to make in order to protect their growth and profitability going ahead. Perhaps the only true to the cloud business in terms of providing software services is the CRM company Salesforce. They have always been on the cloud, and now they also provide additional services to customers through their cloud application. And I think from the $40 billion, $6 billion must be attributed to probably software sales of Salesforce. And it's growing quite well now. Some companies were smarter, so they did not want to fully adopt the cloud because you don't want to maintain the server infrastructure and everything. So they said, we will sell you the software, but instead of charging you one time when you buy that box of Photoshop or whatever, we will charge you a subscription per month. So suddenly a product which could not be afforded by say 90% of the population who are photography enthusiasts or even professionals, they could buy this software for $10 a month and use the same technology which a professional photographer will be using to edit their photos or store their photos. So they converted their model from one-time license sales to a subscription model which kept giving them annuity revenues. So now Adobe's 80% sales are annuity revenues instead of which could have been 30-40% in the past. The cloud software which is mentioned here is their marketing platform, their subscription business by selling Photoshop and other softwares that they have is growing quite well for them and has literally taken over the entire revenue stream. But these are not the only businesses who benefited a lot from the cloud. The cloud exists because of some of the businesses we'll talk about right now, and one of them is the big blue Intel, which has the highest market share in server and desktop computers. A data center category for them has grown 13% on that base, just selling microchips for the servers, whereas the rest of the business which sells chips for everything else has not been growing for a while. This is one interesting business. So I was aware of NVIDIA. I'm a gamer and I used to play games and I used to use graphic cards made by NVIDIA. So I was aware of this business, but I never really took it seriously. I said it's a niche. Who requires graphics processors after you close the game? I mean, that's the only use you can possibly think of. And I was naive. So just to give you an idea of the technology that they are running. So Intel makes the CPU and these people make the GPU. So CPU is central processing unit and GPU is graphics processing unit. So the CPU, imagine it's like a CEO of a company who takes strategic decisions one after the other and executes them one by one. But the GPU is like the COO, the Chief Operating Officer, who has to keep parallelly executing all the strategies that the CEO is coming up with. So it's a parallel processing computing system and this is a sequential processing system. So the computers that we have at home, they have an Intel CPU which will execute the program one after the other, but there is this graphics processing unit which is parallelly running to make sure that all the graphics are displayed properly, everything renders very well, the fonts are smooth and the windows open on time. So it basically shares the load of processing, and that is an interesting application for the field that we love so much. It's autonomous cars. Anywhere where you require instant data crunching parallelly apart from running a sequential process, a graphics processor is used. And one application for that is data centers, obviously, which is a very small business. But the biggest business that they have now come up with themselves is a kit for autonomous vehicles or artificial intelligence technologies, where you require the computing power to parallelly run along with a sequential process. So when you hear words like deep learning, machine learning, AI, there is some NVIDIA technology in the background which is making it happen. And the kind of scale this business has gotten after these technologies have come up, and I think they have shown amazing resolve to bring this business back to the limelight, because one of the competitors, AMD, also has a equally good graphics processing unit. So just like there are Mac fanboys and Windows fanboys, there is also an AMD fan following and the NVIDIA fan following. And I recently was reading about this AMD company and I read some news item, just came on the side of my eye, corner of my eye, that some guy, AMD fan, killed an NVIDIA guy because they were arguing about it. So it's that serious. I mean, it's not like Mac and Windows anymore, it's at a new level altogether. So despite having that fan following, that business is a loss-making business, whereas this business really makes a lot of profits and also has grown revenues substantially in the past few years. And I don't need to say anything more, just look at the stock charts when you go home and you'll be amazed what is happening in this area, where the applications have now broadened and they have the products available to sell immediately. But this is the most important part for me, because this is the reason why I did this entire presentation, to understand what cloud is and the impact on the enterprise IT business. But before that, I want to just highlight the reason for why there is this massive growth in the cloud business now, because we discussed it has grown and now it's known, but why? So the most important point is that if you are a software developer or a software programmer or whatever, you get a faster time to market. So tomorrow if you are Snapchat and you decide to launch your app, you don't have to start buying servers. You just launch the app. That's it. If it fails, you update it, it will work again. Just keep updating, keep adding features. All you have to do is scale, nothing else. If you are an enterprise software person, you can extend the application functionality much faster. Or if you are a Snapchat, you can add a goggle or whatever into the app immediately. You don't have to wait for adding a new server, then make sure the capacity is available, the network is going to work or not. It's not your headache anymore. Just keep surfing. It also allows you to meet customer demands dynamically. So there are some softwares, like say a music streaming software, where you know that the analytics is recommending some songs to the customer immediately. You get the dynamicity because of the cloud. It's not because there is some server chugging along in the Spotify's office or Apple Music's office somewhere. There is a cloud somewhere which is providing the service to you. Suddenly, the fixed costs for you as a business now turn into variable costs. And this is something which takes time to understand, because if you focus on the P&L and you realize that everything is now, so depreciation is now becoming a cost, an operating cost, you will see the profits wither away very fast, because as you scale and start using these services, it can disproportionately cost you more. But imagine if you had to buy the servers and a delay to market and allowing somebody else to take your market away in that time frame is much more expensive than just paying something for the computing needs. Again, if you run the software on your own computer or it is in the cloud, it will do the same thing. The software is the same, it has the same functionality, the utility is the same. So really, if you can provide a technology which is smoother and more portable across platforms, why wouldn't you go to the cloud? So I think these have provided a good bedrock for the cloud business to grow. But we again have to come back to our highly customized and really sophisticated enterprise IT guy who has his specific needs. What about this guy? You cannot tell him that you spent $1 billion implementing a database system and tomorrow or next year, just because a cloud system is available, you have to move to the cloud. I don't think any person will care about this. I think I need to depreciate my assets properly. I have a return on investment expectation. I have my own concerns regarding the cloud. Why should I do that? And really, if you look at the number of enterprise softwares out there, cloud, non-cloud or whatever, this is an exaggeration, but still, it just gives you an idea of various services that the guy has to manage, the CIO has to manage, and the kind of issues he might face. So talking between the apps, the locations of all these apps and where they're going to be used, support systems provided for them, the security for all these applications and the data, all these things have to be worried about by this IT team of an enterprise. So somewhere we need to understand that the enterprise IT model is changing, and maybe for good or bad we will see in the future. But in the olden times when IT technology was sold, we had long-term integration contracts. So you wanted to implement a software at a client side, they will send proposals to everyone, people will bid with their respective tenders, and then it will be negotiated upon as to which guy has better capability and how they will provide the services to us. Now on a cloud, what tender will you negotiate? All you have to do is sign up and buy a server and shoot your service out there. I mean, why do you need to even worry about these things? Software packages were available at that time also as a purchased licensed, and now it can be purchased as a subscription. Excuse me. You no longer need to buy the whole thing, you just need to buy whatever you require at that point in time. I agree it's a substantial revenue loss for the software developer, but he knows that over a period of time, as users will navigate towards that service, they will get the multiplier effect of all these subscription softwares, systems. When you hire a system, excuse me, when you hire the system integrator, you get all the baggage of that person. So a guy from India has to go on site, he will work there, cultural differences and all these things. But now all you have to do is take your data, move it to the cloud, take your software, move it to the cloud, sit in your own office premise. You don't have to call a guy from India, just do it. At that time, you had to, if you wanted to adopt a new software system, you had to clean the data for that new software system. So if you were on some database system, you want to go to an Oracle system, you had to clean it properly. So you hire these people again, you do the cost arbitrage, you get 1,000 guys from India punching in these data in that particular format, and now it's clean and it can be taken to the Oracle system or new system or whatever. But now the software providers themselves are allowing you the same functionality or most of the functionality which we would have lost because of this people requirement at that time. Now all they have to do is press a button and data is converted to the relevant format, whichever you want to take. And if it is that easy, why will you need those many people? Another biggest need was, like I mentioned, the softwares had to talk to each other. So database talks to the front end system, the front end talks to the HRM system, the HRM talks to finance, and all these things talk together. They may not be sold by the same software provider, because you cannot buy the entire package, it's too expensive. So you optimize. You think HR is not too important, you buy a cheaper pan. You think finance is very important, you buy the top of the line product. So they all have to speak to each other. So you need to provide these connections between all these softwares, and that required substantial amount of development effort. So the item on the segmental results of IT companies, the application development and maintenance, majority of it comes from these things, where you have to provide that integration between softwares. Well, now that role is gone because it's all in SaaS. You can provide a connector to these softwares very easily. Data gets converted at a moment's notice, not even in your premise, but somewhere else. So you can clearly see that there's a dramatic shift in the way IT services are now being consumed and also the way they are sold. So what does a system integrator do? I mean, if he has nothing else to do, what does he really provide? Why do these companies exist? So first thing is that the system integrator needs to recommend and coordinate specific services. So the job of this guy is to analyze what the customer's needs are And it may not be always necessary to move things to the cloud. You can always have something on premise, but have a augmented service somewhere on the cloud, and you can recommend that kind of service. Naturally, you require specialists for that. So if somebody says that you have data which you have stored, if you're a retail chain and you have a data of all customers walking into the store and swiping credit card in the store from the past 20 years, but you have no idea what to do with it. How do you learn from that? How do I develop my retail store in a better way and data can be used in some meaningful way? So this IT guy can recommend, okay, why don't you use Google's machine learning algorithm, analyze the data, and it will throw you some patterns out. Or if you don't like that, use Amazon's analytics platform or whatever. And that speciality has to be brought onto the client side by knowing something yourself. In the past, people used to clean it up by hand, and now manual cleaning of data is not required anymore. Machines are much more capable of doing it in a much faster way. The interesting part about cloud services and the way you sell them is if you learn something once, it can be immediately adopted somewhere else. It's not like what you've learned, say if you learn a machine learning system of AWS, it's not going to go to waste. A next client who comes who has a similar requirement can be sold that idea at half the time because you've already learned it. So all learning that happens with these technologies can be scaled instantaneously, but you have to focus on learning and specializing in those areas. Also, some software is needed to be developed, and there is variable cost because it is on the cloud or a private cloud or wherever. But every time you use the cloud, you're consuming some server usage over there. If you design a bad application, if you design a bad software, it's going to consume more resources than required. So that's where the specialized help comes in, where you develop software which is lean and can work on the cloud very well. So I was really surprised. So when I read the conference call transcripts, there's only one word splattered all over it called digital. And digital, we do this, we do that, we are providing cloud, providing social, mobile analytics. Okay, fine, but what are you doing? And when the moment you start looking at specific keywords, specific numbers, you search for these things specifically, not reading the entire document, but only those things. That's when you realize that there is no number clearly mentioned anywhere, except for a few companies. So I just did a comparison because numbers are available for Accenture for the past 5 years. They have started moving from their traditional business to the new digital business, which includes all these technologies. Over the past 5 years, they have now grown this practice into $13 billion worth, and it's growing at 50%. Traditional IT services is still there, which is now as a support system for the digital business, and it is now growing at 10% only, which is still a decent growth rate in dollar terms. I went through Infosys's transcripts, everything. I couldn't find a single mention of a specific number where they are saying that this is the percentage of work we do in this technology platform. They will be doing it, but I don't know why they don't mention. Maybe it's a competitive information they don't want to share, or maybe it's too small to talk about right now. So traditional business for them has grown at around 9%, and I'm estimating it's about a $150 million order book which they had recently in the third quarter for the entire year, assuming it goes through entirely. That is their digital business. Again, TCS has better reporting in that case, and they have reported probably a couple of $1 billion of digital business that they're doing, which is commendable based on it's a big company with a huge employee base. Wipro again has come close to 1.5, it's rounded off to 2, but they have also done a reasonable amount of effort in trying to get to that digital side by doing some strategic acquisitions, which other people have been shy to spend money. So people want to argue buyback or dividend or acquisition. They don't care, they just go and acquire. We think this is good, we did it. Maybe it's wrong, doesn't matter. But they just went ahead and did it. And I admire that kind of confidence. Because if you don't do anything, you will just stagnate and wither away. I mean, I want you guys to, even if you have tried these companies, to tell me if I am wrong somewhere. Because I'm trying to understand, are these guys going to move to the next step sooner or later? Because I keep reading in the articles, I talk to people who work in the industry that they are going to fire a lot of people, thousands of people probably in this quarter because of the performance results have not been great. So that is fine, that happens all the time. There's no need to be alarmed about it. But if you read the conference calls recently, the addition of people from the freshers side has been reduced dramatically. So net additions, which used to be like 30,000 in a year for the entire industry, is now at around 10,000 or less than that. And that is a little bit alarming thing because you don't require people. If you noticed here, all these things can be done by a less number of people who just have to plug and play with technology. It's like Lego blocks connecting them. No need to build the Lego blocks from scratch. No need to melt the plastic and create the molds and everything. We skipped a lot of things I did not discuss, and these are really interesting things to discuss and learn about to get a good grasp of how the business side of cloud computing also is growing. So one is the business of selling APIs. So APIs, so if you, to give a crude example to you, an API is like the connectors behind your TV which allow you to talk to several devices like a DVD player or whatever, a Tata Sky or whatever. So in a very crude way, but in software parlance they do the same thing. They allow communication between different softwares and also between hardwares now. So your GPS device which used to tell your dashboard screen that turn here, turn that, talk to the speaker, now your phone does that. So some things replace other things. One more important thing is the regulatory restrictions on the cloud business itself. So healthcare data, financial information about banks, customers, that cannot be put outside of a private network or a private cloud network. So these things will restrict. So BFSI segment is probably more than 50% of the IT spend. They have been on the forefront in spending money on new technology every time, and that can severely restrict the cloud business's growth in the enterprise side, but only to that extent. Again, machine learning is a fascinating concept. If you combine all the other streams of AI, you will learn a lot of things that are available now which can be called up at a moment's notice. So if you have a natural language learning tool that you want to create for yourself, you learn from somewhere, copy the code, call that function, and it's that easy. The way I'm saying it, probably in slightly less time, but also. The new trend of selling to the developers, selling to all the chief executive officers, the marketing officers, the HR officers, instead of just going to the CIO, whining and dining that guy and getting the contract. Now the industry has moved towards selling to all chief of all departments, and that has created a tremendous opportunity in terms of diversifying software sales. So CIO is important, but no longer the only important person in the sale of that software or a technology. And most importantly is the rise of open source technologies which have, so like Google has generously kept their AI or machine learning API free for everyone to use. It's amazing, right? Data is still yours. You bring your data and you use the technology and you learn whatever you can learn. But if it is free for you, which they have spent decades developing, it's something awesome to use if you are really requiring it. Again, just to simplify these things, I found this website called sidewaysdictionary.com, which provides real world analogies to all technical terms. So if you really are confused about some things, definitely visit this page and probably learn something in the real world sense of what technology means, rather than reading the boring definitions and trying to make sense out of them. I think we'll conclude. Any questions? Yeah, sure. Can you pass the mic, please? Yeah,
Except the space required.
Sorry?
Except for the space required in the server, any other thing affect the tariff?
Can you elaborate the question, please?
Like for example, I'll be putting on a cloud my things and everything. So what factor they decide the rates to be charged?
Okay, so it depends on what services you require.
Correct.
So if you just require a storage space somewhere, then you will just require hard disk space and you will pay per GB used.
Nothing else.
Nothing else. If you want to execute a program which accesses the data, so you pay for data storage, you pay for that program which is running for whatever CPU cycles and it giving you that server access for you. So the server is online 100%, you just require 1% of the time, you pay for 1% of it. So it's actually broken down into small microservices. You can actually tweak and make sure you don't overpay.
Okay, thank you.
There's one in the back.
Hello.
Yes, sir.
So in your opinion, what is it that, so there are no Indian companies that have really cracked this space in any vertical. So what in your opinion is kind of, hurt or impeding their progress in the cloud vertical in any line of business?
Okay.
Like there's no big name that comes up from Indian companies.
So he said correctly. So Tata Communications is a very big provider in networking and storage servers. So that is infrastructure. That is a commoditized segment in the market. which you may provide some services on top of that, but are you really going to compete with the likes of Amazon and Google in providing those services? Maybe they are good. I have not studied them in detail, but maybe they are good. But I am pretty sure that if somebody is having 37% market share, people will want to go there because developers are using it. You have more usage information in developer forums. You know what issues have happened and how you can scale things up very fast or scale things down or write something for that platform. I don't know, maybe there are less developers. So just an illustrative point. So how many people attend AWS conferences? Number is more than 30,000 people. How many attend Google's cloud conference? This year was 10,000. So the disparity is there in developers, interest of enterprises, probably the venue size also. But I think there is a significant advantage for all these big tech companies who have opened up their, say, kimono, to use that word, to allow everyone to use their technology that they have provided for themselves. So I think that is a huge advantage, and that's the moat for these businesses probably. But Indian companies are there, so they are in the commodity space. There are some SaaS companies in India. I think there is an ERP company listed. Zoho is an amazing company. So not listed though, but still trying to find some listed names. Yeah, Nikhil.
Ronak, thanks.
Yeah.
Great work done.
Thanks so much.
Just talking about Tata Communications, I haven't studied it as well.
Right.
But having looked at this space, would you assign a lot of value to the underlying cables that they have? Or you don't think that's the key and it's the infrastructure that they set up? And the second question is, we're talking about cloud computing. As a layman, this question comes to you because you've done work. Do you see, what do you see as a major risk to these models? Like you said, if there is an interruption in terms of service, that can actually put off a lot of clients.
Right.
Like that, anything that can go wrong, A, and B, anything that can disrupt this, which could be one level ahead of even this. Since you've done work, you would probably have seen that like 3G aa gaya, 4G aa jata hai, something like that. Is there one step forward in this?
So, superb questions. So the first one I'll take. So there is certainly value to the underlying infrastructure that company has put in. But as a business owner, I would like to see some ROC over a period of time. These technologies, when you put up, they cost a bomb, and you have to keep renting them at a good capacity utilization in order to get the adequate ROC to make cash flows for doing further investments. But that is not your, capital is not your problem. Look at Amazon, they have capital. They did some $9 billion free cash. They invest $10 billion every quarter in building these same things that Tata Communications is building themselves. Would I want to be in a position to compete with Jeff Bezos? I don't want to be. I would rather partner with him. Would I be in a position to compete with $10 billion cloud infrastructure by Google, data centers by Google? I don't want to be there. I would rather partner with them. So I agree that there is definitely some value. It's up to them how they create the business around that value. Maybe you provide it as a private service to someone and get some more benefit out of it. It's a business model choice, strategic choice, but underlying technology is same for everyone. Or Intel server bought by Google might be similar to Intel server bought by Tata Communications, but or the cable laid by these people undersea is same as somebody else. But what are you doing with that thing? Are you providing specialized services? Because we saw these kind of services over here. I'm sorry. I think I lost the slide somewhere. So these services, these are now the differentiating factors. At one point, cloud was a commodity business which was giving infrastructure for rent, and now, because it has now grown deeper, developers have also used it, they have used or innovated in their own technology systems. I think they have created differentiation for themselves. Maybe somebody does not require that. Maybe if I am a developer and I know exactly what I want to use, and I'll bring my own stuff and go to the cloud, then I will go to the lowest cost cloud provider who is the most reliable service and closest to me. Then in that case, it might have a use case. But
sorry, I'm just adding one question. Is anybody allowed to underlay these cables across water? Ki kuch uska regulations, countries have rules?
Good question. I don't know, but it has to be understood. There might be some things required, because they use
generating $10 billion free cash is one thing, but I'm saying, can you do it now, or is there any restriction?
But would you do it? Because there is a lot of ample capacity available. So there is something called as dark fibers. So during the .com boom, people had laid like crazy, So there's a lot of unused capacity there. So why would you want to duplicate unless there is specific use case? So for example, the way these people connect to each other is through public CDNs, which is called content delivery networks. So they are basically proxy servers at different locations which will just bounce your data across different locations so that you will feel that the same site is accessed at the same speed. So you're using google.co.uk, it will call some Google server in UK to bring that site to you. But you will not feel the speed delay because it is bounced off all these CDNs everywhere. So there is an option to go with the wholesale CDN providers like Bharti's, Reliance or AT&T or all these guys. There are so many of them and there are huge players. Tata Communications also might be one of them to provide network routing. But that is a low value business. It's a low margin, low value business which everybody can do. Or Google says I will build my own CDN which will give me highest speed across all my nodes whichever they want to connect or call from. So that is their differentiation they want to add. So if they are building it for themselves anyway and they are saying that I have a better technology available and you can use it along with Google Cloud, it comes with it for free. So you pay $1 for computing and access that server, it's the same pipe the data is going to come from. So you will want to go with that. It may not have too much value to you, but it is there for free and you don't have to pay something extra for it. Google will not say, okay, if you want to use mine, you pay extra, but there is some other provider who will give you 0.5 second delay. I mean, I don't think that is a game changer in terms of service provided. But in terms of regulatory requirement, I don't know. There might be something, but I think it's a solvable problem. Anybody could do it. Why would you do it is a different question. Your second question is much more interesting. So you said what can disrupt cloud and what issues can happen. So one thing happened recently where in North America, Amazon AWS site had an outage for a few hours because of some error. As per their reports, they said that there was some error while changing some code and it took down the entire server. So was data lost? We don't know, but a lot of apps which were running, a lot of services were running from that data center could not be accessed by people and there was an outrage. You know how people, like, something is 1 minute late, outrage, cannot wait for a few minutes. So when these technologies are built, if you really read through the material, they are built to fail. So they don't build in terms of longevity in mind. They think that this thing can go down anytime. Let's build for failure. Let's not spend too much on buying the highest end equipment. We will have a system of replacing much faster. So there was some number mentioned, some very crazy number mentioned as to how many servers fail every hour across the world. And it's staggering. It's in thousands of something. So I don't believe that, but still, if it is happening and they have figured out an automated way to handle it, then that can create a lot of redundancy for you. Plus, as a cloud user, you can provide how many redundancies you want to create and pay for it. So maybe the default is 3. They will make 3 copies of your data everywhere in real time. But you think, okay, 3 is not enough for me, I want 5. 3 to North America mein hai. What if something happens in North America and entire cloud is gone? I want 1 in Singapore, I want 1 in Australia. So you add 2 more and pay for it. So these services can be bought based on your requirement and your paranoia, all those things considered. Beyond that, just 1 second. Beyond that, there is a major threat which people, anyone has not considered, and for a good reason, because you don't understand that threat. So I will show you what that threat is. So you can see these green things, right? So this is the aurora borealis, which is northern lights they call. They happen somewhere on the poles. South pole is northern lights and North pole is northern lights, south pole is southern lights. Aurora australis they call it. So these things happen because of solar winds. And solar winds are charged particles which enter the atmosphere, but because of our atmosphere, they bounce off and the deflection creates these kind of dazzling lights. We think it is really awesome, but there was a big solar event some 100 years back which actually took out the entire telegraph network that we saw. Undersea cables, everything was taken off. There were batteries in the racks being charged. They got charged twice their capacity because of that one solar event. It's called the Carrington event. You can read about it on Wikipedia. It's fantastic what can happen if a solar storm of that magnitude happens. And nobody knows if it's going to happen. And it's a fatalistic scenario. But there are ways now. We have satellites in space. We have done solar research. We can know that event can be predicted and we can turn off our machines so they don't go out because of a solar storm. But yeah, that is the super scenario, the end game possibility where everything goes down, no Snapchat, nothing. Go back to your notepad. Sorry, you had a question. Can you pass the mic? Are you done? Yeah, cool. Thanks, Nikunj. Yeah, please.
I briefly read somewhere that Ramco System is the company which has some
yes.
platform as a service, right?
Yes, I have not studied them in detail.
Particularly, yeah, just briefly, I thought they started with an ERP, only
Yes.
Indian company which did an ERP,
Yes.
which initially I had some doubts on, but apparently even recently I've seen companies are buying their ERP, and then I saw some ad or something that they are selling this, I think ERP for HR system on some platform on the cloud. So probably this is the only company which is trying to do something.
Worth looking at. I have not seen it, but it will be interesting to see what they have achieved. Yeah. Can you pass the mic, please? Thank you.
So the impact of cloud on IT services, the traditional companies, I think is understood in the sense that their ERP implementation business, their traditional application development, I think will suffer, right? But what is the implication on someone like, say, who do technology services for engineering companies, so Scient or say someone like L&T Technology. So is there an impact of this on those companies? I mean, do you have any view on that? Someone like Access Gates, which is too specific for engineering companies, helping them. I think, I don't know in what way they help designing new products or, but what do you know about that? Does this impact those companies?
I think it will impact in terms of saving a lot of cost. So these companies, they do design outsourcing or database management of all these old designs.
Okay.
So whenever a new item, so suppose a new car is released and they are working with some auto company to work on those designs, there will be somewhere down the chain of providing some support services to the designing team, which is at the company's headquarters or whatever. So in that case, you have the technology to available to you, which will save you money if you move it to the cloud or maintain a lean infrastructure at your end. It might save you some cost, but I don't think a meaningful impact is there. My understanding is limited. I'm just trying to think on my feet as to what the impact might be. But good question. If you come to know, ping me.
Sure.
Yeah, just one sec. Thanks. Yes, Mehul sir.
See, I've been reading, all of us are investing in stocks for future growth. And I've been reading a lot of reports like last one was by PwC. Indian economy will grow from 2 trillion to 19 trillion by 2030 and so on and so forth. But none of these reports, I mean, so many have been, BRICS came out earlier, report, Goldman Sachs and whatever. None of them talk about impact on jobs, and now I find they are deliberately avoiding that subject, to either show a good picture or not. But every presentation, if you go back over your last 5 presentations, every presentation smells of job loss,
Yes.
So I'm not seeing any real. Now, if the economy is to grow, then you need consumers. And if the consumers are to spend, they need money. And if the jobs are not there, where does the money come from? So is there any study being done on this? Or any light you can throw on this? Well, I'm not able to find this anywhere. And I find specifically latest report of PwC is avoiding this, that we are not competent or whatever.
I think I don't want to get too philosophical, but the answer is in the capitalist system where there are gaps, moments where there are inflection points changing from one thing to the next, where a lot of existing incumbents will lose their capacity to earn a living from that work, which is no longer required. There will be certain percentage that will reskill themselves out of necessity or out of opportunity given by somebody else, or maybe some funds they have saved for themselves to reskill. And it's a long process to come out of it. There may not be an answer to it because we never had. So if you go back to history, if you go to industrial revolution and automation coming in that area, in that era, you will see that people lost jobs. The spinners and weavers, they lost their jobs to machines which were much more efficient and more accurate. So one thing is to train them to use these machines. But again, we were talking about a lower base of population at that time. After 250 years, we have a different base of population and the impact might be much starker than necessary. But yeah, the same impact would have happened that time also. Tomorrow, all of us sitting here, investors, are replaced by one small box which has that AI thing we talked about, so with a loving thing that, oh, AI, amazing, and it displaces us only, and no more FOF. So yeah, it is possible. Maybe the AI will talk that you guys have learned nothing, let me tell you what it is. So displacement happens, some people have the ability and resources to take the new direction, some people don't. So it's, I think, a combined responsibility, maybe from government, from industry, and it happens. So if you look at all the commentary in IT services companies, they talk about reskilling people. They also talk about firing. So of course there is a lowest benchmark of people who don't meet the criteria also. Fine, so they will be reskilled in some different way. But existing employees who are retained, they have to be reskilled for the new businesses to grow. So that should happen from somewhere. So there is some cost for somebody. The company has to pay, either the government creates initiatives, which they have. But I don't think there is a holistic solution. And I don't think people are avoiding talking about it. It's just too confusing to understand what can be done about it. And so if you are a socialist mindset person, you will think in those lines that somebody has to do this for you. If you are a capitalist minded person, you will say, okay, I have some resources that I will do it for myself. So technology is available. One of the technologies in that exponential thing was the education revolution, where you can go online and learn everything. Today, if you want to learn any of these technologies, all you have to do is sign up for 18 hours of programming courses, and a novice can turn into a decent programmer within a 6 months time. And of course, from there, your skill will pick up only when you start applying in different areas and introduce yourself to new technology. So I don't think there's a right answer for that, but it's a fantastic question, and I don't know the answer to it. Rishit.
They're also talking of universal basic
Get the mic.
income, that's
Yeah, yeah.
right? There is, in answer to his question, I think the leaders are worried and they are talking about providing a universal basic income because they think they cannot provide enough jobs, right?
I think the very interesting argument was mentioned by Bill Gates in one of the conferences recently, or some interview. He said that the moment a machine automates, the machine has to pay tax for displacing somebody else. And it's fantastic. The idea is unique. I don't know how to execute it, but it sounded interesting.
Ronak, everybody, all the software companies now are talking about digital and like SMAC and all of that. So as an investor, what differentiation are we looking at, like one company over the other? Like, are we basically talking about who got there first, whose percentage of revenue is more digital compared to traditional? Or is there any skill set or anything else, like I'm not really very familiar with this space, that are we looking at that differentiates, some company over the other? Something you can elaborate on?
So I talked about this, but does not mean I understand this completely. I may know a little bit here and there slightly better than somebody else, but if you put me in a room with all these techies, so one guy from Google Cloud, one guy from AWS, and they explain what they do, I will also stare at them blankly to some extent, because I won't be able to perceive the differentiation over there. I think scale helps and going first helps, but that does not stop other companies to grow technology in a different way. So IBM, so if you look at all these conferences, okay, IBM's conference focuses only on enterprise. There is no talk about how your app can do better on IBM Cloud, or there is no thing like Snapchat for IBM. There's nothing like that. They have been an enterprise computing company. They will always provide services in that category, and they're clear about that. So in enterprise, these people, Google and AWS, will have a very difficult time to convince people. Maybe there's some pioneering enterprises will convince themselves and say, okay, now let's stop IBM and everything. I will go to AWS and learn something new. But there are the other 90% who will not try that. They will say, it's too difficult for me to figure out. I don't want to invest in a CIO right now. Let IBM, who's been my partner for the past 20 years, let them take care of this transition. So you are there. That is the differentiation. So maybe the awareness of what differentiates which company may be at a different point in time or different point in space, or a different instance or a different example. I think that if you, on an average, you are aware that somebody is strong in this space. So for example, if you, I think just don't think of anything else. If you ask a question to answer in 1 second, which is the autonomous car company you will back, the answer, I don't know what the answer is, but I would say Waymo. I would say Waymo, we have seen examples of that cute car driving around, and we have seen that. Maybe there is some better technology somewhere available, but we have not seen too much of it. So that differentiation we are not aware of. Maybe Uber has a better technology underneath the hood, which will displace their own driving business in some way or the other. The differentiation is difficult to catch, but you can get general idea of what people are doing, and then just focus on that one single thing. That okay, if they talk about this, are they growing in that space or not? If they're not growing in that space, then they're just talking. They're not doing anything. So that's why I mentioned. So if they're saying that you're all digital, show me the numbers. I mean, show me the money, literally show me the money. Where are you making the revenues from? Are you implementing cloud? What are you doing? So this guy can show. Why? Maybe he's misrepresenting, I don't know, but he's showing something. I can actually track a number that there is some growth to this particular business.
What about the mid-cap guys, Mindtree, Persistent, anybody whose percentage is sort of higher in digital?
There are many. So Persistent does have this business only as a business. They don't have the other IT services, the bread and butter business that they were doing in the past. So they don't do what Infosys or TCS do. They do the digital part only. So they have less to lose than say some other companies who will have much more to lose if that business turns dramatically. But it won't turn dramatically. Enterprises don't suddenly start shifting. There will be a dull cycle of, people will start realizing slowly and steadily, okay, then I will not use this service now. See, no CIO will tell the sales guy from IT services company, I want to spend more with you next year. Nobody will say it. Logically, nobody will say it. Everybody will say, how much discount are you willing to give me on the existing service? And that pricing pressure will keep weeding out players saying that, okay, this does not make sense for me to do at this margin anymore. Let me differentiate myself in some other way. So then they will innovate and bring something to the table. Okay, they said, ye nahi karne ka, I have a digital solution for you. Why don't you try this? So then they will try on some part of their business, and that's how the engagement will grow. So you will see small trickle of growth at one side, and you will see a slow drain on the other side. The problem is in between, there's a lot of churn in terms of, so you will not see growth, the kind of the growth we saw in the past, but it might be a tapered growth. That's my view. And mid-cap company, again, how do you differentiate? What are you? Are you going to differentiate on price? Are you going to provide a vertical specific service? Then yeah, you can definitely be there. So if you are the king of retail IT services, you will kill it. If you are a king of pharma IT services, you will be the big boss in that area who will capture some substantial amount of revenue. But ultimately, you will have to move to the technologies. You will have to convince the client that I cannot afford to provide the same service at half the margin. So let's optimize. Let's remove your infrastructure cost and let's see what happens. But you have to be specialized enough to understand that this is a solution for them. You need to know that, okay, AWS makes sense for this guy, or Google Cloud, or some private cloud by Amazon or Dell or HP or whoever. Or can I build that cloud for this person? That's where the reskilling part comes in. So they also need to adopt the newer technologies. So Infosys gives a number of 90,000 people trained with design thinking. TCS says 125,000 people trained with digital technology skills. That's an amazing number, right? I mean, you have that kind of people, man-force working in growing that business. So this 2% can be growing actually at 2 billion can be growing actually at 30-40% for these companies. The thing is, can it sustain? Because everybody will get on the bandwagon. So, good question. I think one question you asked in the beginning about security services. Can you repeat that?
The question was basically, if everything is going on the cloud, how do we see security? Because I'm guessing it's the prerogative of the provider, whoever's providing me. Say you mentioned Adobe, they're I'm going to rent their service, not buy it. So do I need to protect myself? Are they going to sort of offer the protection? How do you see cloud and sort of protection in general?
So I think at a customer network level, you need to provide some security anyway, because you are using the same terminals to access the cloud and internet. So that basic security you will require anyway. At the cloud end, they might be doing some wholesale things or their own proprietary things to protect the data. So there's one term somebody used in one of the conferences called data custodians. So who's going to be the custodian of data? So I think that is a very good way to represent. Like our shares are in the custody, we know that they're going to be safe until the custody operations are in existence. If they go bankrupt, then whatever. If somebody steals our digitally signed shares, whatever, and what happens to the shares? So it's a valid question to ask. But on the cloud side, I'm not too worried. On the customer end, you have solutions already in the market, like network level security, firewalls, everything is already there. And they keep updating themselves as the security response to other threats in the market.
Why aren't you worried on the cloud side? I didn't can't the hackers or whatever attack from that side, not really the customer side?
They can, but you have scenarios planned. Your redundancies made for that. I think one event has to happen for the world to know the cloud is also not as safe as we think it is. but that has not happened so far, or maybe it has happened, we don't come to know. It's been kept quiet. I think this the book on Googleplex, it has a nice section on how Google asks its own engineers, there's a team, separate engineers who attack their own systems and find different ways to get inside. That's a good exercise to do probably. I think that's the last question, we'll wrap up. Thanks so much. Amazing discussion. Thanks.
You know, I always say what we see today. This large new office is years of sacrifice and hard work. Relax. I know it's a tough job, son. Clients can be tough. Times can be tough. Situations can be tough. Half a day. Half a day is all I give you to feel sorry for yourself. Then it's on to the next. You need to have a tough skin.
A tough skin. The stories I could tell you. You see, people tend to see the big picture, the rosy picture. But let me tell you one thing. Being an entrepreneur is, well, tough.
Son, a business has a life of its own. One bad day at the office doesn't mean the end of the world.
Winners are not people who never fail, but people who never quit.
The sweet smell of success. Half a day. I give you half a day to enjoy it. And then it's on to the next. There's only one
right way.
At PPFAS, we think like Rahul and his father. That volatility is a fact of running a business. And buying equity shares is like owning a part of that business. We use value investing principles to manage your money. This means we invest in the right businesses at reasonable prices and for a longer term. PPFAS Mutual Fund. There's only one right way.
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.